Cassie, get this. Get this on the ground, Cassie, on your ground. Like, you gotta show them. Do it like me. Tell me when you ready, now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Hold on, I wanna be. This is my daughter. This ain't no picture. Just say, hey, say, this is my dad.
Hey, this is my daddy.
Say, this is what we do.
That's what you do.
You know what I'm saying? Tell him I'm the hardest from the west side.
West side.
Say, he the hardest from the west side.
I still feel alone. I've been off for 5 years, don't know if I really want to take it. Mother said shed tears, she mad at me, I hope she make it.
You're gonna have to slow down.
This is Kevin Brown Sr., a 45-year-old father who would tragically be killed for getting his son's baby mama pregnant. On January 25, 2022, the Fort Worth Police Department would respond to a crime so shocking and unimaginable that it took place on a quiet street in Fort Worth, Texas. A father, once proud of his son's musical talent, had been executed in cold blood. But the shocking part? It wasn't just any crime. The murderer was none other than his own son, 23-year-old rapper Brilan Crazy Boy Bray Brown Jr., a son right from the four walls of a prison.
You did? Go, nigga. Hold on, this is my cousin.
Don't diss on Lil Zach, and no more. Finna get mad on the whip. Like Como, eat untamed, we be creeping in the store. Hey, the Chris got a camera while we shoot, that's a promo. I don't wanna hear shit, you niggas saying. Nigga, I don't want no feature, you know my friend. Cut throat in T, nigga, tell me what you saying. Dressed up in our black scene,
He orchestrated the calculated murder of his own father, fueled by a betrayal involving his baby mama getting pregnant for his own father. How does a son end up taking his father's life in such a calculated, ruthless way? This isn't just a story about violence. It's a story of a family destroyed by revenge, jealousy, and a world where betrayal runs deeper than blood. But before that, let me take you back to 2022 and the city where it all began. This is the life and death of Kevin Brown Sr. Fort Worth, one of Texas's largest and most dynamic cities, is known for its rich blend of cowboy heritage, vibrant art scene, and booming businesses. However, beneath its polished exterior lies a darker reality: violent crime. With one of the highest crime rates in the state, the city has long struggled with gang rivalries, street conflicts, and simmering tensions. It is within this backdrop of struggle and resilience that Kevin Brown Sr. lived his life. Born in 1974, 40-year-old Kevin grew up in an environment where survival often required more than hard work. It required grit and determination. Driven by a simple yet powerful aim to provide for his family and create a stable future, he dedicated his life to making sure his loved ones were secure. While much of his life remains undocumented, those who knew him remember Kevin as a steadfast and dedicated father. He was a man who relentlessly worked to ensure his family stayed intact despite the many adversities he faced. Kevin's story is one of resilience, a man doing whatever it took to overcome not only the challenges of life, but also the volatile and turbulent environment that surrounded him. Yet, as much as he fought to protect his family from the dangers lurking outside, on January 25, 2022, those dangers would come knocking at his door. The day began like any other in the quiet neighborhood of Beacon Way, Fort Worth. Kevin Brown Sr. stepped outside his home around 5:55 p.m. to check his mailbox. The scene was tranquil, almost too calm, as he stood by his mailbox, unaware of the deadly trap that had been set for him. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary moment in the life of a father, a quiet task in the midst of a quiet day. But what Kevin didn't know was that his son had orchestrated this moment to be the end of his life. A black Chrysler 200 had been idling near the house for over 10 minutes, just waiting for Kevin to step outside. Inside the car were Ashlyn Durham, the getaway driver, and Damon Cotton, a 19-year-old who was tasked with pulling the trigger. Brilan, despite being locked away in jail, had masterminded every detail of this plan, directing his co-conspirators to kill his father. At precisely the right moment, when Kevin was standing by his mailbox, he withdrew nothing closed the door of the mailbox, and stood beside it with a phone to his ear. That was when Damon struck. The black Chrysler driver steered around the corner and slowed. Damon leaned from the rear passenger side window and released a torrent of rifle fire on Kevin. Brick particles floated in the air. One of the rounds tore into his head. Blood spread from his body, stretched near where the driveway meets the street. It was over in a flash. The car sped away, and within moments, Kevin's lifeless body lay at the edge of the driveway, surrounded by the remnants of the violence. Neighbors, who had been going about their business, were stunned by the sudden violence. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed, not in a neighborhood that had always been known for its tranquility. In the hours following the shooting, police officers scoured the area for any additional evidence that could lead to a suspect. Neighbors reported seeing the black Chrysler drive off at high speed. But it wasn't until detectives began tracking the car's movements that the pieces of the puzzle started to come together. Real-time crime cameras across the city helped them trace the vehicle's route and link it to Ashlyn Durham, who was driving, and Damon Cotton, who had fired the fatal shot. From there, the investigation took on a darker turn. As police looked deeper into Brilan's past and his connections, they began to uncover the true nature of the betrayal that had led to his father's death. It wasn't just about gang violence or street rivalries. This murder was the result of an internal family conflict, one that had been simmering for years. And at the heart of it all was Brilan Brown Jr., his own son. On the surface, Brilan Brown Jr. was a 23-year-old rapper from Fort Worth making waves in the local music scene with raw, gritty lyrics that spoke of the harsh realities of street life, gang rivalries, and survival. Known by his stage name Crazy Boy Bray, his aggressive lyrics resonated with many listeners. But his music was more than just a reflection of street culture. It was his life. A member of the notorious Rolling 60s Crips, Brilan's rise in the rap world went hand in hand with his increasing involvement in violence and crime. He grew up in a tumultuous household as the youngest son of his father, Kevin, Big Kevin, Brown, a man with 6 children from various relationships. From a young age, he was rebellious, showing little regard for rules or consequences. By the time he was a teenager, he had already been committed to the Texas Juvenile Justice Department for burglary and aggravated assault, and he was building a reputation in the streets. His involvement with the Rolling 60s Crips had made him a target and a player in one of the most active and dangerous gangs in Fort Worth, responsible for frequent shootings, robberies, and retaliation. Brilan wasn't trying to escape the streets. He wanted to control them. But his life wasn't just about gang violence. It was also deeply impacted by the death of his older brother, Kevin Jr., Little Kevin. The two had been very close, and Little Kevin's 2016 murder during a robbery attempt left Brilan devastated, angry, and lost. This loss would mark a turning point for him, and the emotional fallout from his brother's death altered his path forever. Following Little Kevin's death, Brilan's relationship with his father became strained. While they weren't completely estranged, there was a growing distance between them. By early 2020, Brilan was more entrenched in street violence than ever before. His name was tied to shootings and violent conflicts, and his reputation continued to grow within the Fort Worth gang scene. In January 2020, a woman named Anjanette Eubanks was shot and killed inside a house on Canyon Circle Drive. The murder was directly tied to Brilan's violent feud.
Remembering her as a kind-hearted woman and a motherly type to so many, Eubanks was shot and killed inside this home we're told she was visiting Thursday night.
All I heard was a bang, bang, bang. But it was, police had the street blocked off here. A lot of vehicles, police vehicles, up and down the street.
Officer Brad Perez says so far no arrests have been made.
If anyone last night happened to see or hear anything around that time, around 11 p.m., maybe like a vehicle driving off real fast or somebody running, anything that appeared to be suspicious, we do ask that you reach out to us with that information.
It's crazy. Folks just don't value human life anymore.
Anjanette became the first casualty in a tragic chain of events. But just 3 days later, another life was lost. 17-year-old Cheyenne Moore, a high school student, was killed in a shooting connected to the same feud. Testimony revealed that both killings occurred while Brilan and an associate, Adrian Robinson, were allegedly driving around in search of Channel 5 JW, a teenage rapper caught up in a violent feud with them. Adrian's girlfriend was reportedly behind the wheel as the two men hunted for their target. But instead of finding JW, they tragically left behind two innocent victims. Lives lost in a conflict that had nothing to do with them. But the feud was only beginning. Just a month later, Channel 5 JW, only 17 years old, was shot and killed. His body was discovered in a front yard with an AK-style rifle lying beside him. The murder ignited chaos across Fort Worth, culminating in a violent Mother's Day shooting at a public park where over 50 rounds were fired, leaving several people injured. These back-to-back murders shocked the community, but they were just the beginning of a trail of violence that would eventually lead to Kevin Brown Sr.'s death. In January 2021, Brilan was arrested and taken to Tarrant County Jail facing serious charges. While most people would lay low, keep their heads down, and hope for the best, Brilan did the opposite. Even behind bars, he refused to be sidelined. With access to jail tablets and phones, he remained connected to the outside world, using them constantly to stay in control. He coordinated with people on the outside, monitored his rivals, and continued to manage his life from within the cell. Brilan didn't stop there. He kept making music, recording and releasing tracks while incarcerated. Some of his songs mocked dead enemies, bragged about violence, and glorified the dangerous life he led. In November 2022, he released a track with a line that sent chills.
I'm for murder work test, but fuck that. Cause most of these niggas ain't worth the murder. Little bitch cheated on me. How can she do that? I don't know what that hard, I just want the hurdle. These niggas that cash Brilan like ain't nothing, no shit, I'ma up the burner. Come to Guala, we got the good cook. I beat up the pot like I Turner.
The reference to a real murder was so clear that prosecutors later argued it was a direct reference to a killing. For Brilan, music wasn't just an art form. It was an extension of his violent world, where murder and melody blended seamlessly. But while Brilan's life was dominated by violence and street life, it was a betrayal within his own family that would drive him to take things further. Rebecca Shea Willis, known as Shay, was a woman who had been in a relationship with little Kevin before his death. After little Kevin's passing, Shay began an affair with Big Kevin, Brilan's father.
Brilan, who had idolized his brother and seen his father as a figure of respect, could not accept this betrayal. The woman who had once been a part of his brother's life was now involved with his father, and not just that, but carrying his father's child. This revelation tore Brilan apart. In Brilan's eyes, his father had committed the ultimate betrayal, not just by being with the woman who had been his brother's partner, but by doing so after his brother's death. It was a betrayal that crossed every line, and Brilan couldn't bring himself to forgive it. He saw it as disrespectful and dishonorable, something that needed to be avenged. From his jail cell, Brilan began to plot his revenge on his own father. With access to phones and tablets, he reached out to his girlfriend, Alexis, and an old friend from juvenile detention and Brilan's girlfriend, Damond Mon Cotton. Through coded messages, Brilan made it clear that he intended to make his father pay. This wasn't going to be a confrontation. It wasn't about a shouting match or an argument. Brilan was planning something far darker. In Brilan's world, loyalty was everything, and betrayal could cost you your life. The anger he felt consumed him, and the plans he began to make would ultimately lead to the devastating murder of Kevin Brown Sr., his own father. But there was more to the story. Brilan's desire for revenge wasn't just rooted in his father's affair. It was about control, about Brilan feeling that his pride had been shattered. In the world of street gangs, betrayal was a dangerous thing, and Brilan could not forgive his father for what he perceived as a humiliating act. From his prison cell, he convinced himself that there was no other way to restore his pride than through death. 19-year-old Damond Moncotton was promised a large payout for executing his plan. Damond would receive $2,000 to $3,000 for carrying out the murder. Brilan also enlisted the help of Ashlyn Durham, Damond's girlfriend, who agreed to drive the getaway car. And then there was Alexis Abieta, who was tasked with buying the bullets and helping set up phone calls to coordinate the entire operation. Brilan's orders were clear: kill his father. The plan was executed with terrifying precision. Despite being in jail, Brilan controlled every aspect of the crime, using technology and his network to ensure that his father's life would end on that cold January day. His anger, which had been building for months, finally exploded into action. Later, investigators uncovered an even darker twist to the murder. The phone call Kevin had been on when he stepped outside was no accident. From his cell in Tarrant County Jail, Brilan had orchestrated the entire thing, arranging a three-way call with the help of Alexis. Through that call, Brilan instructed his father to go outside and check the mailbox. Kevin, oblivious to the imminent danger, followed his son's instructions. At that very moment, Damond was lying in wait with a rifle. The ambush unfolded in real time, with Brilan listening in as his deadly plan came to life. But what Brilan didn't realize was that his actions would forever alter the course of his family's history. The betrayal and murder he orchestrated would leave a lasting scar on the community and his family. It wasn't just the death of Kevin Brown Sr. that shocked Fort Worth. It was the revelation that a son could commit such a heinous act against his own father. The arrest of Ashlyn Durham and Damond was swift, but Brilan's arrest would come later. With the help of surveillance footage, phone records, and coded messages, detectives pieced together the full story. While Brilan's co-conspirators were swiftly arrested and charged, it was the discovery of Brilan's own involvement that shocked the community. For weeks, the city had been trying to make sense of the senseless murder, but the revelation that a son had killed his father left many in disbelief. A man who had once looked up to his father as a role model had turned on him in the most brutal way possible. The trial of Brilan Brown Jr. would go on to captivate the community. The courtroom was filled with emotions as the evidence of his involvement in his father's murder was laid bare. Prosecutors presented a damning case, detailing how Brilan had masterminded the execution from behind bars, using coded language and instructions to ensure the murder went according to plan. Brilan's involvement in the planning of the murder was well documented. Authorities had pieced together his messages, phone calls, and the surveillance footage that showed his co-conspirators carrying out his orders. But what stood out to many was the chilling realization that Brilan had carried out this murder not out of financial gain or street rivalry, but out of a deeply personal betrayal. When the jury deliberated, the evidence was clear. Brilan had plotted his father's death with premeditation, and his actions were calculated and cruel. Brilan was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The magnitude of his crime, coupled with the deep family betrayal, made his conviction all but inevitable. The community reacted with a mix of shock, anger, and grief. The murder of Kevin Brown Sr. was not just a loss for his family. It was a tragedy that sent ripples through Fort Worth, shaking the very foundation of trust that holds families together. The city had witnessed too much violence, but this case hit closer to home for many. The idea that a son could murder his father was a bitter pill to swallow, one that left the community grappling with questions that would never have clear answers. The Brown family was left in tatters. Kevin Sr.'s death had left an irreplaceable hole in the lives of those who loved him. His children, his extended family, and his friends were all left to pick up the pieces of a shattered family dynamic. While some members of the family tried to make sense of Brilan's actions, others were consumed with grief and anger. For Kevin Sr.'s surviving children, the loss of their father was a blow that no one could have prepared for.
What made it even more heartbreaking was the knowledge that his death was not the result of a random act of violence, but a cold-blooded betrayal orchestrated by his own flesh and blood. The Brown family's struggle to comprehend Brilan's actions was compounded by the fact that they had lost a loved one in such a brutal and senseless manner. Brilan's mother, who had also lost a son to the streets of Fort Worth, was left to mourn not only the death of her husband, but also the fact that her own son had played a role in that death. For her, the grief was compounded by feelings of guilt, anger, and confusion. How did it come to this? How had the son she raised become capable of such horrific violence? Fort Worth's community, which had already been dealing with its own struggles with violence, was left in shock. The murder of Kevin Brown Sr. became a symbol of the destructive power of gang violence and family betrayal. It was a reminder that the bonds of family could be tested in ways that no one could have anticipated. The news spread quickly, and soon people all over the city were grappling with the same question. How could a son do this to his own father? The pain and sorrow felt by the family were visible, but so was their desire for justice. The Brown family remained vocal throughout the legal proceedings, calling for accountability and the swift conviction of those responsible for Kevin Sr.'s murder. Despite the devastating loss, they continued to stand together, seeking closure and justice for a man who had been taken from them in the most brutal way imaginable. As we reflect on this tragedy, several questions linger in the air. What causes someone to betray their family in such a brutal way? How could a son, raised by his father, come to the point of orchestrating his murder? And what does this case say about the larger issue of gang violence and its impact on families? The case of Kevin Brown Sr.'s murder serves as a chilling reminder of how quickly a life can be taken and how deep the roots of betrayal can run. Brilan Brown Jr.'s actions forever changed his family and his community. His journey from aspiring rapper to convicted murderer illustrates the devastating consequences of unchecked violence, bitterness, and family disintegration. But there's more to this story than just the murder itself. It's about the destructive cycle of violence that ensnares families and communities. As we examine the life and death of Kevin Brown Sr., we are reminded of the importance of family, loyalty, and trust, and the devastating cost when those bonds are broken. What do you think about it? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this story intriguing, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.